So, thank you, Royd. Much appreciated. Ash Winter. So I've been a tester for probably about 10 years now, I think. Prior to that, I worked for a little data analysis and postcode mapping company in Harrogate. So I was a bit of a jack of all trades then, and I decided to sort of narrow that slightly and really get into the testing market. Just a couple of points of order. I'm a big tweeter. I think Twitter's a great way to engage with, like the rest of the software development community, and a great way to advertise at meetups like Agile Yorkshire. So get on there and get tweeting and get engaged. I also post longer stuff on testingisbelieving.blogspot.co.uk. It always amuses me when I look back on my earlier blogs. They were slightly less refined than the rants I put on there now, but and blogging is a great way, again, to express yourself. So for tonight, tweet on the hashtag Agile Yorkshire tag there. So tonight's topic for me is tested to death. So I kind of want to talk about how testing is a critical part of developing software, but also you need to be very careful with it. You need to be careful with how much you do and what you test and how you test it. So you need to be absolutely aware and have an evolving strategy, because otherwise it can affect your team, it can affect your product quite profoundly. So I guess my first point here is I'm a tester. So this is a weird topic to talk about how testing might be a negative thing against your team and your product. And yeah, I guess it is. But as a tester, I'm also a critical thinker. So I look at what testing activities need to be done and what impact they might have. So I think it's part of testing to question why you need to test and what you need to test and whether or not it's adding value. So I also believe that too much testing is bad. Testing is an inherent link to the law of diminishing returns. You can do loads of it, and you can keep doing it over and over again. But whether or not it tells you anything new, gives you any more information, well, that's a slightly different matter. So you should be very careful. And also, serving tests is bad. So if you get in a situation where where the tests are dictating the pace at which you develop, then that's not great either. So testing is inherently value-based. So if the tests threaten the value rather than give value, then essentially you're serving the tests and not the other way around. And testing the same thing at different levels can be bad. So I'll go into this a bit throughout, but essentially I'm kind of talking about testing the same thing at different levels over and over again, and proving out the same question doesn't really add any value in the long term. Okay, so let's do a quick state of the nation. So how many of you think you do too much testing? I knew it. Knew it, monsters. Think you do too little testing? Yeah? Think your testing is effective? Big straight arm there from Andy. Okay, that's interesting. So, nobody thinks they do too much. So, let me tell you a little story. So, I was a consultant with a company called The Test People for 6 or 7 years, and then I made a big jump. I went to work for a startup called Fans. So there's a number of fans in the audience tonight. So they're all going to have their opinions on this. Definitely going to have their opinions. But this is my take on how we approached it and the problems that we had. They may agree, they may not. I'll let them beat me up in the pub afterwards, or in the car park if I make it that far. So it was a big jump for me to go from a job of 6, 7 years to work for somewhere where the future was less than certain, but could have been absolutely sparkling. So the team, I'm looking at them all here. And there were so many great people in that team. Yeah, probably the best team that I've ever worked in. And I don't know if I'll see the like of it again. But essentially, it was absolutely awesome. And we were ready. There was an idea. We were going to build a football app. Yeah, with like a real-time voting capability, with a social media network hanging off it. And it was ready to take on the world. And we had the team to do so as well. And we had a strategy for our testing as well, of course. We've all seen the testing pyramid. Yeah, nodding heads. So essentially, testing, try and do more in the bottom layers. So cheaper to run and have many, many more of those, and then graduating throughout. So we had a strategy as well, and we focused on that. But then, strange things started to happen with the testing as we progressed. So basically, as your application becomes more complex, then your testing changes as well. So we had different layers of testing, unit tests and integration tests, and all the way up to acceptance tests, which exercise different parts of the stack. But I think that we wrestled with too much similarity in those tests. So you look at the pyramid, and you see basically the pyramid kind of gives you a delineation between them. But in reality, there's slight overlaps. But I think our overlaps became too overlapping. They became almost the same thing, which made life really, really hard. And then I think especially the integration tests, so that middle layer. Yeah. So I always found that they were confused as to what they were. They went into the unit testing layer. They also went into the acceptance testing layer, but proving very subtly similar things and could never quite justify their value. So I guess you just need to be careful there with introducing, a graduated level of testing, because you can be repeating the same test, maybe at subtly different levels, but essentially, are you proving the same question over and over again, but in different ways? And then, I guess other smells came to light. So there was occasions, I think, where we changed the tests to get the code to pass. So it was a slightly sort of wrong way round looking at the world. Yeah. So again, that's kind of, we were serving the tests rather than using them to add value. And our strategy for mocking and dependency injection, I think it's one of those things that you need to have a real handle on quite early. So, and I think it added to that sort of, into that kind of circular discussion about how we were handling these things. And then there was kind of tooling talk as well. So let's try other test runners, see how that helped. And they have made subtle differences, but perhaps not at the core of what we were trying to get to. So those kind of tooling changes can sometimes be an anti-pattern as well for trying to get to the real nub of the issue, as in what value are the tests providing. So this kind of resulted in, well, quicksand is probably the best way that I can describe it. So building new stuff, I think, got slower and slower as we went along. And I think it felt like we weren't sort of trying to build particularly complex applications, but because of the amount of tests that had grown up around it, we then struggled to turn that into sort of speedy delivery, so that the teams in front could really get on with what they were doing. And then changing stuff as well that already existed was probably a little bit slower, because there was a lot of test assets already existing. So again, that kind of slowed down the process quite significantly as well. And I think the worst thing as well was the sad faces. So there was kind of a lot of discussion around testing and what it was supposed to achieve and how we were getting there. And it was that sapping of sort of the team morale which was probably the thing that affected me the most profoundly as well, to see that happening. And then dependent teams were sad as well. So personally, I was on the app team. So the mobile development team. So we were sort of always waiting for things to come through, yeah, or complete things that we could actually deliver, things that were really tangible. And then sad sponsors. So unfortunately, it always gets to that in the end. And we had some interesting sponsors at Fans who didn't do sadness, just anger. So ultimately, a dream and a team expired. And it's one of the saddest things of my professional career by a long, long way. And I hope that I never have to feel like that again. But it was really not the only reason. Yeah, the pace of delivery. It really wasn't. But it didn't help. There was a lot at play. But I don't think we should despair. We really shouldn't. Because there's always learning to be had. Yeah? All the guys at Fans, most of us are sat here right now. We're all still alive. Yeah? We've all survived the experience. I think we're a bit spiritually richer for it, shall we say? So so in life and testing, there's no failing and only learning. So in no particular order, I kind of have a top 10 of the things that come to my mind now when thinking about test strategy based on my Fans experience. So, number 1, all tests must die. So, tests have a life, and you create them, you give birth to them, you look after them, you see them grow up, and then, unfortunately, most tests do tend to hang around a lot. So, but eventually, they must go away, because your product will change and your technology stack will change. So if your tests aren't going away, then you have to question them and ask why. And you can kill them all. If they're really, really hurting you and they're damaging how much value you provide, you can kill them all. Because the cost of maintaining them and wrestling with them versus the cost of not delivering value is, well, it's a no-brainer. And then be especially pointy with tests that pass all the time. Testing is about information. And if it passes all the time, then is it really giving you anything new? Is it telling you anything about your product or your technology stack? Huh? And so you can be especially pointy with those because they're not telling you anything new. Again, following on is about chasing sunk cost. So it will sink you. So tests are inventory. Yeah? And what do we know about inventory? You've got piles and piles of stuff that you need to go through. And testers merrily spend all day going through piles and piles of tests and finding out which ones they need to run. So, but there's an inherent cost associated with inventory. So it's like, removing parts of that inventory will really, really help you to deliver value. So I think there was one instance where there was one line of code and there was like 800 tests that needed to be changed or something of that magnitude. I was like, oof. So slight heartbreak as well. And that kind of goes back to the team morale thing, because that must have been a sad day. And the guy who did it, he was sad anyway. So again, think value and not cost in terms of tests. Yeah. So testing is a value-based activity. If you do any testing that doesn't generate value, then you have to question it. If you're just repeating the same thing over and over again, then you have to question it. And unit tests as well. So this is, make sure you're actually writing unit tests. So this isn't a fan-specific thing. This is kind of a general pattern that I see out in the world. It's like, so a company will say, oh, well, our unit test suite looks like this. And I'll look at it and I'll be like, those aren't unit tests. They call this and they call that. So you're really testing the smallest unit in your technology stack, and therefore you're getting the value. So again, it's worth asking those questions. And also writing tests first. So this is another one that, again, I hear quite a lot, heard it at fans as well. So the app is not special. You can always write tests first. There are people who they do this. This is not as natural as breathing, writing the tests first, because more likely you'll only have the tests that you actually need, rather than lots and lots of tests. If you posthumously go in and add unit tests or integration tests, then you're probably going to have a lot more than you actually need. So again, thinking of testing as a value-driven activity. Dependencies. Just remember that you're the child, the dependency is the parent. You need it. It doesn't need you. So I think, again, it's like knowing what your dependencies are, knowing which classes call which other classes, and how you're going to effectively mock those out. So again, this is especially true as your stack evolves as well. So as your stack changes, then your dependencies get more complex, and they get probably more numerous as well. So having a real handle on that is absolutely critical. And checking as well. So when I look around lots and lots of different companies, not just fans, see lots and lots of checking going on. But how many times do you need to check that 1 + 1 = 2? All the way up and down your technology stack. It's like, so it's having that critical thought about the test that you're writing. It's like, well, am I fundamentally testing something that I know a computer already does? So, and again, that's a pattern that I've seen a reasonable amount. So really, really sort of looking at how many checks you are writing and what value they actually add, as opposed to how much testing you're actually doing, and how much you're thinking, well, does this solve the problem? Rather than saying, well, I know that a computer can add 1 and 1. So do I need to continuously do that throughout my stack? Probably not. And number 7 is to think small. So very small packs of tests that reflect the system. Easier to manage, they'll run independently, and they'll give you a pattern of feedback about your system and how it looks. And which areas are more problematic and which areas are less so. This can be done, via different tags and lots of different ways, but essentially think small, because we tend to think small in terms of a lot of component-based and architecture, but then the tests often seem to be in a big pack. So let's not do that anymore. Separate the ignored tests. So ignored tests is a classic pattern. Separate them out. They're just noise in the end in whatever test you've got set up. And then destroy them. I mean, you've made the decision to ignore them, so they're always in source control. So if you're really, really not paying that much attention to them, then don't worry about them. Again, it comes back to the inventory question. So you've got lots and lots of tests, which involves lots and lots of sorting through things and deciding which ones to run, which ones not to run. But if you've made that initial decision, then why not follow through on it? Pairing is smart. 2 brains write better tests. I think, and a massive hint is especially a tester in a dev. That really, really early pairing between a tester and a dev. I think, it's one of the things that I certainly advocate a lot now. We did a reasonable amount at fans, I think, but possibly not as early as we could have done in that way. And then the use of more than one model. So we talked about the testing pyramid. So we have that was kind of a notional model that we use as our approach. But I think it's probably worth looking at how you test in different frames. So you might take a quadrant-based model. So Marik's quadrants, for example, and say, okay, so in terms of our tests and how they're set up, How many are technology facing? How many business facing? Because if you've got too many technology facing tests, it might be time to balance your strategy out again. So it's like just running the way that you think about testing through different models to say, well, how balanced actually is this? Yeah? And what can we actually do about it? And finally, context. This is a standard slide which I put at the end of all my presentations. So at the time, we weren't even in beta. Well, we were in kind of a closed beta, but we weren't out to a wide audience. So we did a lot of testing. And I guess that's one of the things that always sticks with me. Yeah? So we weren't even in beta. We did a lot of testing. So, I don't know. It feels to me like our focus was wrong. And it does make me gently weep sometimes. So, summary. Testing is great. Yeah? I felt I needed to say that at the end of this. Because testing, when driven by value and driven by context, is a massive, massive value add to your product. It can tell you about the product. It can enable you to make real decisions about what you're doing with it and the direction you're going. Yeah. But you need to evolve your strategy as you go. The application becomes more complex. Yeah. More third-party integrations, perhaps. Other things happening in your stack. You need to evolve the strategy more. It needs to be active. And again, that's one thing that I will take with me from fans. To say, right, this is the strategy. We need to engage with it on a regular basis to say, well, is it still what we're doing? Is it still what we like? And are we still adding value with our tests? And just make sure that testing serves you and not the other way around. Again, if you're in a situation where you're spending, as a general tell, if you're spending more time on your tests than you are, significantly more time anyway, than you are actually building things in the round as a system, then is that really the balance that you want? Is that the balance you need at the time? Based on saying, well, we were in beta, and we spent a long time testing and possibly less time developing, building. So, and that's it. That was my journey at Fans.